Hello everyone, my name is Ryan H. Lewis, and today we're going to talk about the elephant in the internet that is AWS reInvent. It is one of the biggest tech conferences of the year. If you have been looking at tech Twitter or tech internet at all, you've likely seen it cross your feed a few times. I'm not actually attending reInvent this year, but I am quite interested in the things that they're announcing and the things that they're kind of releasing for preview and the things that they're talking about. And in previous years, I've found that it's oftentimes really difficult to keep track of everything that's coming out. Every day, there are multiple announcements. There's all sorts of new things. And if you're not actually at reInvent, if you're at your job, a lot of times you can't really keep up with everything that's going on and being announced. So I thought I would do a daily recap of what was announced and what was talked about at AWS reInvent for this year. So I'll post one of these videos every day, and then I'll probably post a weekly wrap-up video just with kind of the things that I care about sometime probably next week. So anyways, reInvent 2019, let's get started. So with all the announcements, I kind of categorize them in three different categories. The first is practical, and I'm not meaning this to be reductive, but a lot of the things that AWS announces and the new services that they put out don't necessarily have anything to do with my day-to-day or most developers' day-to-day. They're kind of more specialized. And so there's definitely just some kind of practical things that announcements that came out that I kind of have a single category for. Then there's some more niche announcements, which are fun. They're kind of cool to talk about, kind of cool to get into AWS and play around with, but probably won't be using in my day-to-day job, which is fine. I mean, there are some people that these niche things are going to be just groundbreaking and mind-blowing, but for me and probably most developers, these are more things that are interesting to read about, but something we'll never play with. And then finally, there are Microsoft announcements. So we'll talk more specific about the Microsoft announcements, but there were a few, at least today, there were a few Microsoft announcements that deserve their own category, I guess you could say. So I want to start with the niche things. So for the niche things, we've got a new service called Amazon Bracket, which is for quantum computing. We've got Amazon Transcribe Medical for medical transcriptions, and AWS Deep Composer, which is machine learning music generation. I'm going to go into all of these in more specifics in just a little bit. Then we've got the practical things, not too many. There's an IAM Access Analyzer, which seems pretty promising, and the EC2 Image Builder, which will let you build images kind of composably, which is pretty cool. And then finally, the Microsoft announcements. There are some improvements to the bring your own license for Windows and SQL Server experience in AWS. And then there's a new service for Windows Server versions when they go end of life and stop getting updates. There's some information on how AWS can support that. So let's go ahead and get into the services. We're going to start with Amazon Bracket, and Bracket was pretty mind-blowing. It's crazy that in 2019 we're already getting a quantum computing service. Quantum computers are still very new. It was just a few months ago that Google announced that they had achieved this quantum supremacy milestone where a quantum computer was able to calculate some equation faster than a conventional computer. And now we already have a quantum computing service. Basically, what this allows you to do is run code intended to run on a quantum computer, either in a simulation on a classical or rather conventional computer, or on quantum computing hardware. There are 3 hardware providers that Amazon gives you options to run on. So it's really cool. I don't know what the pricing is on that. It sounds really special. So I don't even know if I'd want to play around with it because I would be afraid of that bill. But what's really cool is I didn't really know about quantum computers too much. And so there are very specific physical constraints that they have to run under. And so what was interesting is that AWS is able to run those quantum computers with those constraints easily, kind of in the cloud, and then give you access to them, which sounds like this may actually be, at least in the near term future, how most, software engineers interact with quantum computers. It's unlikely that you're going to take on the cost of purchasing one of these and then setting up the physical kind of area to actually keep that quantum computer running. But what's also cool is that now, researchers around the country and around the world can get their hands on this quantum computing hardware in a really easy way. So this is cool. I'll probably never use this, at least not anytime soon. But it's really neat that we're already kind of at this step. All right, for the next service we're going to talk about, we've got Amazon Transcribe Medical. Amazon Transcribe Medical is kind of a continuation, or you could call it a sequel or a DLC expansion pack for Amazon Transcribe. It's actually its own service, but basically it's Amazon Transcribe for medical purposes. It's NLP. It does speech to text. One thing that I didn't know is that medical workers such as doctors this was in the article on this, spend an average of 6 hours a day actually transcribing things for patient records, which is insane. I can't even believe that. But Amazon Transcribe Medical is specific for those use cases. And what I kind of didn't understand is why not just use Amazon Transcribe? Like, why do they have to go to this special service? And it's because the model that is running with Amazon Transcribe Medical has been trained on these medical terms. So, if a doctor would spit out a medical term, and it had been trained on, I don't know, me talking, then it would have some weird, it wouldn't understand those words. And so it wouldn't be able to accurately transcribe those words out for the doctor. So it's pretty cool. I always find it interesting when Amazon puts the money and kind of the focus on a very niche service like this that caters to a very specific market, because it makes me think that they saw kind of an opportunity in that market and then kind of went after it. And so I know there's probably some numbers that say like $2 trillion of, available like market in the medical software space. And so I imagine like some executive at AWS rattling off these numbers and saying, this is why we should take a team and put them on Amazon to create this Amazon Transcribe Medical. And here we have it. So it's out. If you are in the medical industry watching this, then this is your thing. Now, another thing that I noticed about this is it, just like Amazon Transcribe, it's not actually like a end user product. It's just an API. So doctors won't be able to use this directly, at least not in their kind of day to day. There's going to have to be software built on top of this. So likely there's already transcription software. Now it can link up to Amazon Transcribe Medical and potentially get a better NLP engine to run off. Next up, we have AWS Deep Composer. And I was a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to get into the preview in time for this video, because I really wanted to come up with like a weird theme song based on using Deep Composer. What this is a machine learning. It creates machine learning generated music. So it has a model that has been trained on, I guess, different types of music, and then you're able to use that to create music. It seems like it's similar to MuseNet, which is a project that OpenAI open sourced earlier this year. But I guess in AWS, I cannot for the life of me think of a practical use for this, like in terms of how would a business use this. There is an interesting product that they're releasing soon. You can sign up for the waitlist, or I guess to get notified. And it's actually a hardware keyboard that I guess is somehow connected through the cloud, through Wi-Fi to Deep Composer, that I don't know. I don't know if you write the music, or I don't really know what a hardware keyboard's supposed to be doing in this case, but it seems similar to Deep Racer, which is a machine learning integrated race car that you can program using AWS. And so I don't know. It seems neat. Again, very niche. Probably not something I'll ever use to make money. All right, now on to the practical service announcements. We have IAM Access Analyzer, which is a new addition to the IAM dashboard. It automatically determines who can access what in your account, and if there's anything that looks odd, specifically, I believe it's looking for any sort of external access to your resources, it will let you know. One of the cool things is it continuously analyzes things. So when you create new things, it will analyze who can access that. And if it's someone outside of, kind of your account, it will let you know. And it'll let you know in cases. Here's an example of it that I just pulled up in my AWS account. They're actually these little findings. And so you can resolve these if it's something that you're familiar with and you're like, yeah, I know this is supposed to be this way. What's I can kind of see that one of the great uses for this is so people stop leaking data in public S3 buckets, which is something that still happens even after AWS has modified the S3 interface so much to let you know, hey, everything is public. There's still kind of cases where IAM policies and roles can be all weird, and people outside of your account can get access to things maybe they shouldn't have. This is a free service. You just turn it on and it just goes. And I kind of can't think of why you wouldn't just turn this on your AWS account. It just kind of seems like something really handy to have. Next up is the EC2 Image Builder. So if you've ever created an EC2 instance, then you've had to pick a Amazon machine image to go on that EC2 instance. Typically, I don't know, I always pick Amazon Linux or Amazon Linux 2 and keep it moving. But a lot of times if I'm loading up an image, if I just pick Amazon Linux 2, it doesn't have some of the software that I actually like to have, like Node or Python. And so what EC2 Image Builder is, it allows you to do a couple of things. First, you're able to kind of composably build the image and tell it, hey, I want Python on there. I want some other things. They've got some existing software available for you. And it's weird because it's Python, PHP, Amazon Corretto, which is like their OpenJDK. And I think one more thing, but there's no Node on there, which is, I think is kind of would be appropriate. There's no Go option. There's kind of a bunch of things that seem to be missing, Node.net. So they'll probably add those over time. But you can build them like that. And then the cool thing is that you can update them. You can update those things separately. And the great thing is that you can then run tests on those updated images before you push them out and try to update your live instances. So it's kind of just a cool addition to kind of images that make it so much easier to manage them. A lot of times you'd have like a whole ops team that would be doing this kind of thing, and now you can kind of do it on your own team. And this is an image of it, that you create these image pipelines and then you run them either manually or on a schedule or when updates come out, and then they output images that then you can update on your EC2 instances. All right, now for the Microsoft announcements. I'm not a big Microsoft user for my software development. Like at home, of course, I have a PC that I I play video games on, but I don't actually keep track of a lot of the professional Microsoft stuff going on. So I may speak a little out of turn because I just don't know what some of this stuff is. But one of the updates they have is some improvements to the bring your own license process for Windows and SQL Server. They make it a lot easier to manage them, to keep them. There's some additions to the license manager service that they have. In addition, it seems like there is ways that you can attach a group of licenses so that you can scale up and down and use those licenses there. It seems pretty cool. It strikes me that earlier this year, Microsoft had an announcement that changed the pricing for licenses for Windows Server and maybe SQL Server for use outside of Azure, which is well within their rights, but is kind of like they're trying to use it as their competitive advantage. So it seems interesting that at reInvent this year, there are some Microsoft specific announcements that came out. And so this is one of them. It seems like they are taking kind of the Azure shot across the bow seriously and trying to improve that Microsoft experience in AWS. And specifically, they kind of, I don't know, this was interesting. So with Windows Server, the versions eventually go end of life, and Microsoft stops releasing security patches for them, which means that if a security vulnerability is found in that software, it will not get fixed, which means that anything running that software can be taken advantage of. And so AWS actually is trying to provide a service that helps people get off of the older end-of-life versions. There's a software component where you can actually take your program and copy some things over into a new version of Windows Server. And then there's also a hands-on customer support aspect that works with customers to kind of get their stuff onto newer Windows Server versions. And what's really interesting about this is it's all in AWS. So they don't want you to go EOL and then just say, hey, I'm just going to use Azure because it's going to be cheaper. Obviously, stick with AWS. We can help you out. We have all this expertise. So it's kind of interesting that this kind of stuff was announced. It will be interesting to see how the Azure AWS competition continues throughout the years. But did you watch that keynote? So at pretty late at 7:30, at least Pacific time, the first keynote of the week took place, and it was with Peter DeSantis. He's the VP of AWS Global Infrastructure and Customer Support. He's apparently, just like pretty much every living human being in Seattle, is a big fan of the Seahawks, and the Seahawks were playing tonight, and they won, if you're interested. But Peter DeSantis wore his Seahawks jersey, which is okay. That's cool. But they started the keynote with one of those videos, like a pre-recorded video, almost as if it were like an award show. And oh gosh, it was just like, it was super cringy. I don't know if it's some Seattle thing, because Microsoft has produced some of the, the cringiest moments in keynote history. Whereas it seems like California keynote people are a little less cringy. I don't know. This is not scientific at all. I just thought, I get it, trying to have fun with it, but oh man, it was people outside of tech. I think they would be pretty embarrassed for us. Anyways, so he talked about a few things. Considering he's the VP of Global Infrastructure, it makes sense that he kind of focused on certain topics. The first topic was high performance computing. He talked a lot about workloads that couldn't fit on a single server, that needed to be working on supercomputers, and how improvements in the kind of AWS infrastructure in the hardware that they have running in the data centers, and in the networking makes it possible to use AWS for things that previously people would use supercomputers for. One of the applications for this stuff is weather modeling. And then they had, I forget who it was, but somebody from F1, like the racing, F1 racing, which I guess I didn't even really know was a company. Well, I guess NASCAR is a company, so F1's a company. Yeah. But they had somebody from, I don't know, F1 come on and talk about how they were using AWS to run kind of things that would normally be ran on a supercomputer, be running in the cloud. They were doing this kind of like drift modeling. They were using fans. I don't know. It was kind of over my head, but that was kind of interesting to see one of the applications and see how they're making infrastructure improvements, and they're starting to be able to use those in new applications. He also talked a lot about machine learning. They have, again, new hardware that's supposed to make machine learning a lot better. They had someone come up and talk about the applications for AWS in terms of machine learning and working with creating new medicines, which was pretty cool. It's nice to see these kind of like how these are being used in the world. And a lot of these things that they announce have come out a long time ago. They just haven't actually released them to the public. They work kind of in the background with companies to start actually getting use cases or real world cases that they can help people understand how they should use this stuff. And then the last thing he talked about is the improvements in their kind of climate stuff for their data centers. There was, I don't know if it was a new announcement, but they did announce 4 new regions, which is pretty impressive, to add to their 22. But then he also talked about how they're using renewable energy sources like wind and solar to create energy for their data centers. And it sounds like create enough energy to actually give back to the countries where they're operating. I don't know. He threw around a bunch of numbers, and it was kind of, I didn't have any context for these numbers, so it didn't really affect me. The thing that was interesting is that because AWS is operating in, tons of countries all over the globe, every single country has different kind of regulations around renewable energy. And so they aren't actually able to just kind of pop up solar panels or wind farms wherever they operate. So I thought that was kind of interesting and not really something I had thought of. So that's it. That was day one. It's always interesting to see what is coming out of AWS and the new things in the service. I was not really blown away by all the announcements today. There weren't really many kind of web developer specific announcements. So hopefully as the week goes on, there'll be some new stuff, new features. I don't really need new services, but new features for the existing services that I already use are always really cool, because then it kind of, I don't have to start a new resource or something. But what did you think? Are you at reInvent? I would love to get your perspective. Or did you watch the live stream? There's going to be more live streams throughout the week, so that should be really interesting. I'd love to hear what you have to say and what you thought about day one AWS reInvent 2019. My name is Ryan H. Lewis. You can catch me on Twitter or GitHub at Ryan Murakami. My website is ryanlewis.dev. And do you want to learn AWS? Maybe you already know AWS and this is pointless for you, but a lot of people know AWS just a little bit and watch these videos to kind of try to understand what's going on. I actually teach courses on Pluralsight, and I've got quite a few courses on AWS there, taught and told from the perspective of a developer, someone actually running a web application in AWS. So if you would like to learn more about AWS, you can learn it from me at Pluralsight. Check out my author profile or just search pluralsight.com for AWS.